Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. The CDC relaxes its mask up guidelines. Fully vaccinated Americans can now safely take off their masks in small to medium-sized gatherings. The Washington, D.C. Police Department is hacked. A ransomware group claims they stole sensitive data and demands a ransom. Former Secretary of State John Kerry is accused of leaking information about a U.S. ally to Iran. Kerry now faces increasing pressure to step down from his post as a U.S. Special Envoy for Climate Change. He denies the accusation. Texas lawmakers try to protect their infrastructure from hostile foreign regimes. The state Senate passes a bill banning regimes like China and Russia from accessing infrastructure projects. A Chicago activist tells us how she's working to combat gun violence by empowering the youth. She says this type of community work has the greatest impact. The more we've rolled out vaccines, the more mask policies have eased up. Now the CDC is giving vaccinated people more opportunities to keep the mask off. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
The CDC is relaxing its guidelines, giving Americans more room to breathe easily. Vaccinated people can now have small and medium-sized outdoor gatherings without masks. The CDC says it's safe, but its director didn't define small or medium-sized gatherings.
What I'll get back to is the basic concepts, because if we define a small and medium-sized gathering, we actually also have to define the size of the space that it's in, the ventilation that is occurring, the space between people. And so I think we should get back to the general concepts.
And if one person in the group is vaccine-free, don't worry, no need to mask up. Other than that, masks are still recommended for everyone, vaccinated or not, indoors and at crowded outdoor events. The CDC didn't say how states should enforce this or how law enforcement will know who's vaccinated or not. Michigan, meanwhile, has extended their statewide mask mandate, and they've expanded it to even younger children. Originally 5 and up, now 2 to 4-year-olds will have to mask up in public, including preschools, daycares, and camps. The Michigan governor says the expansion is her response to rising infections among young Michiganders. This will be in effect until at least late May. Now, President Biden says he has spoken with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi about sending vaccines, but he implied that the U.S. would need enough for itself before giving India a hand.
I've discussed with him when we'll be able to send actual vaccines to India, which will be my intention to do. The problem is right now we have to make sure we have other vaccines like Novavax and others coming on probably, and I think we'll be in a position to be able to share.
The CEO of Novavax, a U.S. drug company, told CNBC that they expect their vaccine to be cleared for emergency use by May. India recorded more than 320,000 new cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday. This is less than what was reported on Monday, breaking their 5-day streak of record-breaking case numbers. Other countries such as France and the UK are already sending medical supplies to India. Steph, I'll toss it back to you.
Thanks, Miguel. And former Secretary of State John Kerry is accused of leaking information about a U.S. ally to Iran. Kerry is now facing increasing pressure to step down. He denied the accusation Monday.
The New York Times reported on April 25th that John Kerry told Iran's foreign minister Israel had attacked Iran's interest in Syria at least 200 times. This came from an alleged leaked tape of a conversation that supposedly took place when Kerry was President Obama's Secretary of State. But Kerry denied the allegations. He tweeted on Monday, "This never happened, either when I was Secretary of State or since." Kerry is facing calls from Republicans to step down from his post as a U.S. Special Envoy for Climate Change. Former U.S. Ambassador to the United States Nikki Haley posted on Twitter, "This is disgusting on many levels. Biden and Kerry have to answer for why Kerry would be tipping off Iran, the #1 sponsor of terror, while stabbing one of our greatest partners, Israel, in the back." Alaskan Senator Dan Sullivan called for Kerry's resignation on the Senate floor Monday.
If this is true, I certainly hope other members of this body, Democrats and Republicans, will join me in calling for the resignation of John Kerry. Enough is enough.
Meanwhile, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik tweeted, "This is a criminal act and John Kerry must be immediately investigated and prosecuted. President Biden must immediately remove John Kerry from any government or advisory position." According to the Washington Examiner, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo led the calls for Kerry to be investigated. Last Wednesday at a press conference on Capitol Hill, Pompeo slammed Kerry for his inappropriate meetings with Iran.
I'm actually doing this publicly and openly, unlike Secretary Kerry, who had private conversations with the Iranians that was trying to undermine our administration.
Pompeo said the tape proves what he has said for years, that Kerry informed the Iranians of Israeli operations.
President Biden is expected to sign an executive order today to boost the minimum wage for federal contractors, raising it from about $11 to $15 an hour starting in January. Biden's order also sets a 2024 deadline for government agencies to raise tipped employees' wages to $15 an hour too. It also includes a cost of living increase year by year starting 2022. The Biden administration defends the move by reasoning it would let employers hold on to top talent, lower the cost of recruitment, and increase productivity. And they say it won't cost the government or taxpayers. A report from the Congressional Budget Office estimates it could lift 1 million people out of poverty, but at the same time estimates another 1.5 million would be put out of work. As Congress is in the process of negotiating details of an infrastructure package, Biden sets his eye on another goal, another $1 trillion package to fund what some call human infrastructure. But it comes with another tax hike proposal, this time on individuals.
The White House is expected to unveil a new spending package Wednesday, an estimated $1.8 trillion to fund things like national child care, paid family leave, unemployment insurance and health care, and free community college. To pay for it, Biden's proposing to double the capital gains tax. A capital gains tax is a tax on the profit earned from investments such as stocks and property. Right now, investors pay nearly 24% on their long-term profits, and Biden's proposal would nearly double that tax rate to nearly 40%, the highest in at least 65 years and among the highest in the world.
A lot of folks are going to focus on the federal rate of 39.6%, but when you include the state and local capital gains rates, we're looking at average capital gains rates topping out north of 48%. For example, in California, it tops out at 56.7%. Over half for the capital gains rate alone.
By raising the capital gains tax, Biden's goal is to increase federal revenue to pay for these big spending packages. But there are other factors that could lead to this not playing out as planned.
Because these households who will be facing this higher tax can decide whether or not they realize their gains and pay this tax, a lot of them are going to decide just to hold on to the asset that has that gain in the hope that that rate goes down in the future. And that means depriving the government of revenue.
Watson says they estimate this change could cost the federal government upwards of $120 billion over 10 years. And it could cause Americans to invest in foreign markets, which would make America less competitive. The Biden administration defends the tax hike by pointing out that only a small number of households will be impacted by the increase. But some critics argue on the matter of principle. Republican Representative Kevin Brady told Fox Business it's the definition of socialism when the government has more control over your assets than you do. This newly proposed tax hike faces tough odds becoming a reality since many Republicans oppose tax increases. So just like Biden's infrastructure plan, this new spending and tax plan faces tough negotiation talks in the months ahead. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
As businesses reopen across the U.S., many of them are still struggling to hire workers. Senator Rick Scott of Florida believes small businesses are competing with federal unemployment benefits. Senator Scott says the federal government should not be paying Americans more to stay at home than to go back to their jobs. He wrote a formal letter to the Department of Labor Secretary Marty Walsh. In it, he asked Secretary Walsh how the department plans to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse of unemployment benefits, like when a person refuses suitable work but continues to receive unemployment. Senator Scott says the government needs to be doing everything possible to get the economy reopened and Americans back to work. And Chinese and other international students will be eligible to come back to the U.S. for classes this fall. The Biden administration announced today travel restrictions will be eased. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the details.
The State Department is now allowing students, journalists, and other select individuals to apply for travel visas to the U.S. These visas are called National Interest Exceptions. They're available to people who have been in Brazil, China, Iran, or South Africa. Those persons are eligible to apply August 1st. Due to the pandemic, the U.S. prevented people who were in those countries from returning to the U.S. The State Department's move comes after it allowed European students to return in March. U.S. universities and colleges have urged the department to expand visa access before international students have to decide where they will study. In its announcement on Tuesday, the State Department said it's looking for ways to process more visa applications in line with advice from health authorities. 2 years ago, just over 1/3 Chinese nationals received higher education in the U.S. That's according to a report from the International Education Exchange. The report said Chinese students brought in about $16 billion to the U.S. economy in 2019. Some schools are requiring students to be vaccinated before classes start. It's unclear whether those schools will recognize vaccinations given to Chinese students that haven't been authorized by the FDA.
Last week, the U.S. Senate introduced a bipartisan bill, the Endless Frontier Act, that would strengthen America's ability to compete with the Chinese regime in science and technology. The initiator of the bill today talked about its importance.
The Endless Frontier Act is an initiative in response to China's very significant investments in research and development and sort of cutting edge 21st century technologies, things like artificial intelligence and quantum computing, genomics.
The bill would allocate $100 billion over the next 5 years to bolster U.S. research and development to counter China's. It would also provide $10 billion to establish regional innovation hubs. Last Wednesday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with Senator Todd Young and 10 other senators from both sides of the aisle, reintroduced the Endless Frontier Act. A similar bill has also been introduced in the House. Senator Young said that if the U.S. is going to outcompete the Chinese Communist Party and make sure American values prevail, it's essential to invest in these areas. The bill can also motivate the American people.
Their creativity can be harnessed in this whole of society effort to ensure, just as we did during the Cold War, that Western values of freedom and opportunity and agency among rank and file citizens prevails over the state capitalist model of the Chinese Communist Party.
Right now, reportedly more than 200 amendments to the bill have been filed. This could delay the vote on the bill, but it also shows great bipartisan interest. In addition, the White House press secretary issued a statement in support. According to a national intelligence report, the Chinese regime is the #1 threat to U.S. national security. Lately, Beijing has boosted their investment in strategic technology.
Hostile foreign regimes will now have to think twice before messing with Texas. A bill just passed the state Senate with flying colors that bans them from the state's critical infrastructure. One of the bill's main authors explains why it's so important. NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
It prohibits countries that are hostile to our nation, specifically China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, from tying into our critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure such as our communications, cybersecurity, our electric grid, hazardous waste, and our water supply system.
Texas State Senator Donna Campbell gives the example of a proposed wind farm project near an Air Force base in the southern border. The Chinese owner behind this investment is a former officer from the Chinese regime's military. His company bought 130,000 acres of land in western Texas beginning in 2015.
What is a Chinese citizen who's a billionaire? What is his interest whenever he's a high-ranking member of the the Chinese Communist Party, what's his interest in this project? As we looked into it, it started looking more and more like a Trojan horse.
The investment drew scrutiny last year, with many experts believing it poses a national security threat. This is because the Chinese company might be able to collect intelligence from the military base, and the wind farm will be connected to the Texas electric grid. Texas State Representative Tan Parker highlights Texas's strategic importance to the nation.
Texas is home to 15 military installations and over 227,000 uniformed and Department of Defense civilian personnel. Texas hosts an array of combat-capable military units and innovative military installations on the forefront of cutting-edge technology.
The new bill will prohibit businesses from signing any contracts with Chinese, Russian, Iranian, and North Korean-based companies or companies owned by citizens of the four countries in relation to infrastructure. It has now moved to the Texas State House. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Data from the Washington, D.C. Police Department may not be safe. A group of hackers claims they have sensitive information and they're demanding ransom. NTD's Lin has the story.
A Russian-speaking ransomware group says they have stolen sensitive data from the server of the Washington, D.C. Police Department. The hackers posted a ransom note claiming they had stolen more than 250 gigabytes of data. The D.C. Police Department said they are assessing the full impact and engaging the FBI to investigate. The ransomware group Babuk is threatening to publish this sensitive information, including informants, if the police department does not respond within 3 days. Yochai Korem, who is the CEO of the cybersecurity firm CyberInt, says the general guidance is not to pay the ransom because it only gives hackers more fuel. But this case is complicated.
We actually talk about lives to motivate them to pay the ransom. But I guess this is a tough situation. We can see other agencies in the U.S. in different parts that in the past has paid the ransom.
This is the third U.S. police force hit by a ransomware attack in 6 weeks, and it's the 26th government agency targeted this year.
Some of the cities and other local and state organizations within the yearly budget, they already put an amount for a ransom. Those organizations understand that this is a wave and they actually prepare for that with all kinds of emergency situations.
Korem recommends both individuals and companies use two-factor authentication. He says this will effectively enhance data security and make it 1,000 times more difficult to hack. Lin, NTD News.
The Department of Homeland Security is launching a new operation focused on combating human smuggling. The emphasis is on taking down criminal organizations that smuggle individuals into the U.S. from Mexico and Canada. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas announced Tuesday the creation of Operation Sentinel. The operation targets transnational criminal organizations involved in human smuggling and trafficking.
We know all too well that these organizations put profit over human life with devastating consequences. With the help of our federal and foreign partners, we aim to cut off access to that profit by denying these criminal organizations the ability to engage in travel, trade, and finance in the United States.
Mayorkas says they intend to disrupt every facet of the logistical network these organizations use to succeed. This includes revoking the travel documents of identified smugglers and their employers, as well as freezing financial assets and suspending trade entities. 100 visas have already been revoked under the operation. Numerous departments and agencies will work together to carry out this comprehensive operation. Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries will also join as partners. A number of experts say smuggling into the U.S. has increased due to the Biden administration's lenient immigration policies. This human smuggler even credited the president and said business is booming.
Con el beneficio que les está dando su nuevo presidente, la gente se animó más a venir.
However, administration officials insist the border is not open. Officials say the new operation aims to protect border security and help save the lives of vulnerable migrants. Border agents have rescued nearly 4,800 immigrants along the border since October. Troy Miller, a senior Customs and Border Protection official, said this includes many who were abandoned by smugglers. He says cartels regularly ditch the injured and the weak during the trek to the U.S., often women and children.
These migrants are abandoned in remote and dangerous areas and usually left without food or water. These organizations are complicit in sexual assault, human trafficking, and abandonment of young children, which we routinely encounter.
He added the message to smugglers is, "We know who you are, and we're coming for you." The National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. reopens in May. For the first time, visitors will see a portrait of former President Trump in the museum's signature exhibition. After being closed for 14 months because of the CCP virus pandemic, the National Portrait Gallery will reopen on May 14th. Visitors will see a brand new work, a photograph of the 45th President of the United States. The portrait will hang permanently in the America's Presidents exhibition. The photo was taken in the Oval Office on June 17, 2019. The America's Presidents exhibition is the only complete collection of U.S. presidents' portraits outside the White House. And coming up, Chicago activists work to combat gun violence by empowering the youth. They say grassroots action changes lives. And over 400,000 students have returned to school in New York City. Mayor de Blasio announces his plan to support their mental health. More on NTD News after the break. Chicago's gun violence continues to rock the community there. Just from this past weekend, 25 people have gun wounds and 3 are dead. While there are policy proposals to combat the violence, we'll look at the community-level work being done to empower Chicago's youth. NTD's Christina Kim has that story.
In 2020, Chicago saw a surge in gun violence with 769 homicides and over 4,000 shooting victims. Officials like Mayor Lori Lightfoot have proposed plans to try to solve the issue, but face challenges with the pandemic. We speak to Chicagoan Aisha Oliver, who believes grassroots efforts can be just as effective, if not more. Oliver says she grew up with great mentors. Her grandparents and school teacher taught her to believe in herself and strive for the best. But that same message was not reflected in her community. Oliver says that's when she knew she had to do something to help.
I had witnessed gun violence and drugs and things like that at a very young age, and there was always something in me that let me know that this just was not normal, that it was not something that I wanted to see for the rest of my life.
So in 2009, she started her organization Root to Fruit, where she mentors youth in Chicago. Every day, she works to turn people's wounds into wisdom. Oliver works with youth who she affectionately calls her own children. She hopes her mentees know that their surroundings don't define them, and their mentality has the potential to change everything.
If you conquer the mind, you conquer the world. And that changed my life because it made me realize that it all starts up here. I had to build my mind just like I had to build any other muscle in my body.
Root to Fruit sometimes partners with community leaders to mentor the youth, takes them to visit colleges, or goes on road trips to show them what's outside of Chicago. Oliver also shows up for their sports games, recitals, and even goes to court on behalf of her mentees, so they know there's someone who believes in them and is cheering them on.
And these are young people who they want great things for themselves also, but if you don't see it every day, and we have this saying in Root to Fruit that a child can't be what they can't see.
This summer, Root to Fruit will be partnering with local businesses, churches, and parks to create a safe zone to partake in a variety of activities. One day at a time, Oliver says they will rebuild the village within itself and that they'll see the fruits of their labor soon enough. Christina Kim, NTD News.
With psychological distress now higher than usual, what are schools doing to respond? NTD's Jason Perry has the latest on New York City's plan for mental health services in schools.
Mayor Bill de Blasio Tuesday announced the city will provide mental health services at all New York City schools by this fall. It's in an effort to address the mental health of students. The city will also hire 600 employees, including psychologists and social workers, to address the needs of students' distress.
These children have also had to experience intense emotional and mental trauma from the COVID-19 pandemic, and it simply isn't fair to bring them back into a classroom and expect them to go back like nothing has happened.
The parents we spoke to support the new services.
I think it's a positive change for the youth. It's good to be aware of mental health problems and, as well as issues in the home.
That's great. That would be a great benefit to the society, definitely.
I think mental health is very important, not only for adults, but children as well, especially during the pandemic.
Mayor de Blasio also announced his plan called Summer Rising, which will provide summer school programs for grades K through 12 free of charge beginning this summer. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
New York City is spending money like never before, and they're able to do so thanks to federal stimulus money. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the city's budget summary.
New York City is entering a new fiscal year soon. Now the mayor introduced the city's highest budget ever. It's called the recovery budget and worth almost $100 billion. And the mayor wants to increase spending by almost $10 billion compared to last year. But critics say that increase is not sustainable.
Two factors enable the increased spending: federal aid and expected tax revenue. But the mayor's documents don't specify in which area he expects taxes to increase.
I don't see really any areas where an increase in tax revenue looks like it will come about.
He added that even if they increase taxes on the wealthy, as the mayor said they would, those people could just keep moving out of the city. And federal tax money will likely stop coming in too, because national debt keeps increasing.
At some point, somebody is going to say in government, we can't keep doing this. We're going to have to work to solve this deficit problem.
According to experts, the city should guarantee a sustainable income.
We need to devote city resources to bringing back Midtown, bringing back the corporations. That's the revenue engine of New York City budget.
He added many corporations found that they can save lots of money by letting people work from home. So the city has to find ways to bring them back. And that starts with the basics.
Quality of life in the streets, crime. These things are New York City government's prime responsibility.
The mayor still has to finalize the budget with city council members. The budget's due at the end of June. Arian Pazdar, NTD News, New York.
Coming up, California's recall effort takes another step towards triggering a special election after passing the signature verification stage. And a text message scam tries to steal personal information from online shoppers. More in just a moment on NTD News.
%90 of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
The number of signatures for California's recall effort against Governor Gavin Newsom is officially verified. It's on its way to triggering a recall election. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more on the story.
California's Secretary of State confirmed that the recall Newsom effort gathered enough valid signatures to trigger a special election this year. Over 1.6 million signatures are verified out of the 2.1 million sent to the Secretary of State.
The next governor of California has to be a governor that can cooperate with this vast state. California has the most diverse state in the country, and it isn't a one-size-fits-all policy place. So the next governor has to have the ability to create consensus among the many different cities, counties, and citizens.
Voters were unhappy with the way the governor handled the pandemic, fire incidents, homelessness, joblessness, and other issues. Voters have 30 days to retract their signatures, and county officials must report the withdrawn signatures in time. If there aren't enough signatures remaining, the recall would fall through. However, if there are enough to move forward with the recall, the Secretary of State must inform the Department of Finance. The Budget Committee will then have another 30 days to review and comment on the estimate before certifying the recall. The Lieutenant Governor will then announce the recall election. Those running for governor include Caitlyn Jenner, a socialite and television personality, John Cox, a businessman who ran against Newsom in 2018, and Kevin Faulconer, a former San Diego mayor, all Republicans. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
Have you done any online shopping during the pandemic? Chances are you've gotten a scam text message disguised as a package delivery notification. This scam is now spreading across the UK. NTD's David Lamb has the details.
Known as FluBot, this malware can steal your personal information from your phone, such as bank details and passwords. According to the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre in April, the spyware is installed when a victim receives a text message asking to install a tracking app due to a missed package delivery. People across the US already received similar texts last year. The spyware can also send additional texts to the contacts in the victim's address book, spreading the spyware. People are encouraged to report the message and then delete it. According to the Federal Trade Commission, bad actors are taking advantage of people during the CCP virus pandemic, such as exploiting consumers' anxiety regarding health and safety, and making phony claims to get pandemic funds. Consumers reported nearly $400 million in fraud losses associated with the virus from last year up to this month. The FTC expects CCP virus-related fraud will continue even after the pandemic. They will explore problematic conduct and seek civil penalties. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Bright yellow flowers in Southern California are welcoming lockdown-weary visitors. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
A dry winter in California has meant the annual Wildflower display there isn't as colorful as past years. But visitors are still able to enjoy hillsides lush with flowers at Chino Hills State Park, just outside Los Angeles.
As you can see, it's well above my height, and I'm 5'9", so it's just nice to be just completely surrounded, completely different world, outside of my house, outside of COVID and everything else. It's just a good escape.
About 60% of the park's 14,000 acres is now covered in the bright yellow exotic flower.
The brilliant yellow flower that we're standing in the midst right now is an exotic plant, but it's still, the color brings out some of the beauty of nature.
Arroyo explained staff weren't sure what kind of bloom to expect this year. That's after a wildfire burned through 60% of the park in October 2020. But he was pleasantly surprised.
Here is not quite fully grown, but it is the mustard plant, and it covers a significant portion of the park right now. Not the entirety of the 14,000 acres, but it can grow 8 to 10 feet tall.
Visitors were also impressed by the bloom. The flowers were a welcome reprieve from a year of lockdown.
Been locked out so long, and we're dying to leave the house, get on the road and drive. And this place has such hills and going up and down, green and yellow and blue. It's just amazing, and the birds chirping, it's just wonderful.
Arroyo expects the flowers to last into June or even July before their color fades. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Coming up, documents allege the Wuhan Institute of Virology has ties to the Chinese military. The institute has reportedly been collecting viruses for a state-led project since as early as 2012. And another plagiarism scandal in China's auto industry. This time, a Chinese car maker is believed to have copied the design of the iconic Volkswagen Beetle. That and more on NTD News. The controversial virology lab in Wuhan, China, may have collaborated with the Chinese military on virus research. A Chinese regime agency funding the research says it has seen great progress. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
The Wuhan Institute of Virology, or WIV, has allegedly worked with the Chinese regime's People's Liberation Army, or PLA, on a massive project investigating animal viruses, including bat viruses. Documents from China's National Natural Science Foundation show the state-led project first began in 2012. UK-based newspaper The Daily Mail first obtained the documents on Sunday. The project was set to discover new viruses that could infect humans and was set to investigate their evolution. The project has 5 team leaders, including Shi Zhenli. She is also widely known as Batwoman for her field of study. Another team leader is a senior PLA officer and expert on bioterrorism, Cao Wuchun. He is also the director of the Military Biosafety Expert Committee. Professor Shi denied her tie to the PLA last month, saying, "I don't know of any military work at the Wuhan Institute of Virology." But the U.S. State Department fact sheet from January claims there is secret military activity at the Wuhan lab. Cao Wuchun's presence as a military expert on the team leaders list is also suspicious. He is listed on project reports as a researcher, working closely with other military scientists. And he also sits on the WIV's advisory board, according to the Daily Mail. Cao was also the second in command of the military team sent to take over the Wuhan lab during the initial stages of the outbreak last year. China's National Natural Science Foundation said in 2018 that the virus research project achieved significant progress. They are the state body that funded the project. And another team leader, Zhang Yongzhen, was the first to announce the genetic sequence of COVID-19 last January. During the first 3 years of the project, he took the team to many provinces in China to collect animal samples. He found 143 new viruses during this time. The massive sample collection, according to the Daily Mail, allowed Professor Shi to discover a strain named RATG13. It's the closest known strain to the one causing the CCP virus pandemic. A new plagiarism scandal is making headlines in China. A Chinese automaker is allegedly copying the designs of Western vehicles. Multiple new models on display at the Shanghai Auto Show look almost identical to pre-existing European models. And Chinese carmaker Great Wall's 3 models are raising some eyebrows. Great Wall's electric car Punk Cat is believed to be based on the iconic Volkswagen Beetle. U.S. website CarScoop says Volkswagen is considering taking legal actions against the Chinese carmaker. The German company has stopped making the Beetle model since 2019, but it still owns the design rights. Volkswagen's new trademark e-Beetle suggests the legendary Bug might make a comeback as an electric car. The Volkswagen Beetle isn't the only Western car model being replicated. Porsche and Rolls-Royce are in similar circumstances. Let's compare Rolls-Royce's SUV with Great Wall's Tank 800, plus Porsche sedan with Great Wall's Lightning Cat. Great Wall isn't the first Chinese company that is drawing scrutiny. Over the years, consumers have seen Chinese clones of many Western vehicles, including the Mercedes-Benz G-Class 4x4 versus Chinese-made BJ80C, Porsche's Macan versus Chinese-made Zoti SR9, Rolls-Royce's Phantom versus China's Geely GE Limo, and Range Rover's SUV versus China's Landwind X7, among others.
Over to Europe. Britain spent billions of dollars on brand new aircraft carriers. Now, one of them is ready to have its first operational deployment. Its destination is Asia. NTD's Lily Joe brings us the details.
The UK's largest signal of maritime and air power in a generation will set sail next month as the aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth departs for its first operational deployment. The £3 billion warship with 8 RAF F-35B stealth fighter jets on board will depart for Asia, accompanied by 6 Royal Navy ships, a submarine, 14 naval helicopters, and a company of Royal Marines.
At 65,000 tonnes, HMS Queen Elizabeth and her sister ship HMS Prince of Wales are the most powerful surface ships ever constructed in Britain. Longer than Parliament and taller than Nelson's Column, she has a range of more than 10,000 nautical miles and can fly 72 fast-jet sorties per day.
The carrier strike group will also include the US destroyer USS The Sullivans and the Dutch frigate HNLMS Everton. The group will carry out visits to India, Japan, South Korea and Singapore.
The deployment will see the units of the strike group visiting over 40 countries and undertaking over 70 engagements, visits, air exercises and operations. Critically, these events will provide excellent opportunities for the UK to develop new and existing trade and political links, particularly in the Indo-Pacific.
The government's integrated review into foreign, defence, security and development policy says the UK will invest in enhanced China-facing capabilities. Wallace says the UK will stand up for its values and stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves.
We are not going to the other side of the world to be provocative. We will sail through the South China Sea. We will be confident but not confrontational.
Sea power expert Dr. Siddharth Kaushal from the Royal United Service Institute says the deployment is a part of a broader tilt towards the Indo-Pacific region.
But what the deployment of the CSG as well as sort of deepening defense engagement with key regional powers does represent is a greater emphasis being placed on regions that previously had been sort of placed beyond the remit of British security thinking.
Prior to leaving the UK, the CSG will take part in a major exercise, Strike Warrior, off the coast of Scotland before departing for the Mediterranean. Lily Zhou, NTD News.
The concept of herd immunity has been debated since the start of the pandemic, not without controversy. When will it happen? Or not at all? What's our current understanding of herd immunity? NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us some answers.
Herd immunity is often mentioned in the media as a target to be achieved, or the golden threshold where the COVID-19 virus is somewhat kept at bay and life goes back to normal. Some would suggest it might just be around the corner. Take a look at this Times headline from the 3rd of February. Given the dire situation facing India right now, perhaps there was something wrong with that assumption. A recent dynamic modelling study by University College London says that the UK has reached effective immunity threshold of 68% already on the 25th of April. Effective immunity threshold is related to herd immunity. Estimates about when herd immunity will be reached vary. Most estimates are in the 60 to 70% area. The New York Times quotes America's chief immunologist Dr. Anthony Fauci as saying in December, "We really don't know what the real number is. I think the real range is somewhere between 70 to 90%, but I'm not going to say 90%. I spoke to Professor in Medicine Dr. Paul Hunter to clear up the issue. He says you need 3 things for herd immunity to happen. Firstly, enough people need to be immune to stop the spread. Also,
you've got to have a immunity that actually lasts more than just a few months. And also you've got to have a virus that doesn't mutate and doesn't generate new variants that can overcome herd immunity and then start spreading again. And I think the answer to all of those 3 questions is we're not going to achieve that for COVID.
Also regarding the new variants.
We know a lot now about new variants that are appearing, and the evidence is very strongly that many of these new variants, the South African variant and possibly as well the Indian variant, or likely the Indian variant, will be able to overcome, at least in part, immunity of vaccination.
Meaning the vaccines may not be completely effective against those variants. Professor Hunter says even with natural infection, as opposed to via a vaccine, people can start to become infected again 3 months down the line.
there is still protection from a natural infection and valuable protection, but it isn't complete enough to enable herd immunity to really develop.
The consensus among epidemiologists is that COVID-19 is here to stay.
I've been saying for many months, our grandchildren's grandchildren will be getting COVID, but hopefully by then it won't be anywhere near the degree of severity that we've been seeing this last year.
I asked him how long we might expect for the restrictive measures to stay in place. He says as more people are immunised, we will come to live in a balance with this virus.
And I don't expect that we will be still needing anywhere near the degree of social distancing that we've had this winter in a few years' time. And I hopefully don't expect to see that this coming winter.
But he says it is difficult to predict, particularly with the occurrence of variants. The speed of getting vaccinating people is also a factor. Professor Hunter says there are far more cases of COVID around than they would expect to see. This is speeding up the mutation of the virus. He says this is because we have not had prior exposure to the virus.
But even when we are infected, we carry a lot more virus. And the more virus there is, the more likely a mutation might arise that could ultimately lead to a new variant that would cause concern.
Public Health England is investigating the Indian variant. They have not yet labelled it as a variant of concern. As far as herd immunity goes, there is still much debate, and in reality, there is still much that can happen. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
Coming up, from Berlin to Istanbul, the pink supermoon awes the world with its beauty. And restaurants around the world are still hurting as more of them work toward reopening. Some adapting their menus for takeout. In the meantime, in Amsterdam, a luxury cheeseburger makes the cut. Find out more here on NTD News.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Italy is easing COVID-19 restrictions in some regions. So Italians are eager to flock to museums and reconnect with their friends over an aperitivo.
In Rome, museums and theatres are welcoming visitors after the government eased COVID-19 restrictions on Monday. It comes as the capital and other regions moved into a yellow zone with fewer COVID-19 restrictions. Without crowds or long waiting lines, visitors could admire the ancient masterpieces up close, though restrictions over social distancing remained in place. Theatres and cinemas are also allowed to reopen. Drama lovers rushed to Teatro Vascello, where productions were back on stage after months. And Rome's famous Colosseum reopened for business too. One visitor from Florence was delighted.
I'm
really surprised the Colosseum is open. I thought it would be later, but I'll take this opportunity immediately because this will be the only chance. I hope this will really be a reopening and not a kind of hiccup like last summer.
The amphitheatre is one of Italy's most visited landmarks, but there are virtually no foreign tourists in the capital. Bars and restaurants are now able to serve people seated outdoors in certain regions. So Milan residents rushed to bars to enjoy an open-air aperitivo.
This is what we have been missing for quite a while. So we are happy, and we want to live and go back to a normal life.
Venice is not yet crowded, with tourists riding down the canals on gondolas. Some residents enjoyed their iconic spritz near the canals.
A luxury hotel restaurant in Amsterdam has turned to takeout service during the pandemic to stay afloat. It's now serving an upgraded take on a humble classic. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
The Waldorf Astoria Hotel in Amsterdam initially balked at the idea of offering burgers for delivery. Then the pandemic hit. Without guests or open dining rooms, hotels and restaurants in the Netherlands have had to turn to other services, like offering takeout. For the canal-side Astoria, that meant a $20 burger to go.
Well, in this period of time, in the middle of the pandemic, you get more and more creative and flexible, and it doesn't matter what you serve, but it needs to be good, need to be the best of what you can do, and need to be the best of town, at least of the competitors. That's the most important.
For $23 plus an Uber Eats delivery fee, the Waldorf Signature Burger comes with an 8-ounce Holstein Friesian meat patty, topped with English Duke of Berkshire bacon, aged Dutch cheese, and homemade relish on a French brioche bun. Uber Eats reviewers have given it 4.8 out of 5 stars. Hundreds of weekly orders have made the burger a success, but they won't compensate for a prolonged ban on inside dining that could extend for months. Crafting the perfect burger took serious research, and Shoot was apprehensive at first.
I was a little bit against it because I'm not a big fan of sending food out what is warm, what is hot. And so I was a little bit nervous, like, is it going to be good? Is it going to be okay? So we did a lot of trial cookings.
Dutch plans to ease some lockdown measures have been pushed back until April 28th at the earliest. In the meantime, the burger is here to stay, and it may even become a permanent fixture on the Waldorf menu when normalcy returns. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Last night was the start of the first full supermoon of 2021. It's also a pink moon. NTD's Sapphire Quarter takes us around the globe for a close-up look at its beauty.
The full moon rising above the new mosque in Istanbul. In the morning light, they complement each other's beauty. Monday's full moon is also a supermoon, when the full moon is at its closest to the Earth. According to NASA, there can be 2, 3, or 4 full supermoons in a year, depending on the threshold for how close the moon has to be to qualify. On the other side of the world in South America, its light dances on the turbid water. This supermoon is also a pink moon, which is any full moon in April. This has nothing to do with the color of the moon. According to the Old Farmer's Almanac, moon names come from Native American sources passed down through generations. April's new moon announces the coming of the wild ground phlox, also called pink moss, one of the first spring wildflowers in North America. Despite the name's American origins, people around the globe still refer to the astronomical event as a pink moon. It gazes down on lonely German streets, competing with the street lamps. The pink supermoon will last until Wednesday. May will also have a full supermoon. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News.
Dogs might be man's best friend, but luckily for one, they're plenty friendly among their own as well. A heartwarming moment as one dog saves the life of a pal. Footage shows the 13-year-old Pomeranian, Chunky, slipping clumsily into the pool. A silly blunder, except he was too small to climb back up the steps. No one was home, no human anyway. The 7-year-old Staffordshire Terrier, named Jessie, seems to realize the danger. She tries calling for her owners. No answer. Jessie starts reaching into the water, attempting to pull her friend to safety, but his wet fur keeps slipping through Jessie's teeth. Finally, after 34 minutes, Jessie gets a good grip and pulls Chunky to safety. A little shaking, and Chunky is as good as new, and their relieved owners are looking into installing a cover on their pool. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.